Hey everybody, and welcome back to the 5 Pillars of Wealth Mastery. If you're joining us today is a special bonus video that brings everything together. Now, in the past 5 videos, we've talked about how to build and preserve your wealth. It's called wealth preservation. This was the first pillar. It's all about bridging the gap from where we are today to where we want to be in the future, what the ideal vision of our life would look like, and all the steps, the action steps you need to take along the way. Then we talked about how we protect the wealth that you built, what I call building a virtual wall or a virtual moat around your wealth. Then we move forward after you got from point A to point B, or got the action steps, and then you insulated and protected your income and protected your assets from now and in the future, really no matter who shows up in the picture. We then looked at, well, how do you enhance everything? And we got into the whole wealth enhancement pillar, which is all about looking at your debt, how to restructure debt, how to pay off your mortgages sooner, and that helps to boost your cash flow. And we also looked at really interesting strategies on how to mitigate your taxes, because the less you pay in taxes, the more money that you have. So we looked at all of these strategies and tactics, and all very, very important. And then once we had that in place, we talked about your legacy and all of the basic foundational pieces you need to have in an estate plan. And then we got into some more of the more esoteric things, or the more esoteric strategies you can even boost your wealth even further for your legacy, for your heirs, for the charitable causes that you're passionate about. And then in the last pillar, which I always say is my favorite, we talked about our psychology, which is the mindset around your wealth. And I told you some stories around you could do everything right. You can nail all the pillars, but if we don't control our own brains, if we don't control our emotions and how we make decisions based on how we're feeling, instead of how we should be doing it based on logic and rational thought, and really looking at every possible solution and getting different opinions that differ from our own to see if it makes sense prior to making a decision. We went over all of the cognitive biases that we all have hardwired in our brains, and we talked about some of the solution sets to overcome them. Because if we make good, smart decisions about our money, we're in a really good position to improve our quality of life by achieving our financial goals. Now, I know what you're saying. You say, Mike, that's a lot. You know, there's so many moving parts. Like, each pillar in of itself has so many moving parts. Who's got the time? Who's got the time to deal with this? It's overwhelming. I have a full-time job. I have kids. It's my spouse. And we have just too much going on to handle all of this. And I want to tell you, I hear you. This was me. All right. Just to give you an example, I was working on pillar number 1, right? After I had gotten out of business school years ago, I got out of business school, we were starting our family, and I was trying to do all the right things, and I was focusing like, all right, I have some kids that were starting out, we're buying a house, we're doing all of these things, we're saving for retirement, we're saving for college. And I sat down and I started looking at my finances one day, and I realized that I have other things that I really need to address, because I had student loan debt from business school, and I had to start paying that. And I looked at it at the time, it was $163,000 plus interest, right? So that was, I think at the time, it was like 175 or 180,000 once we added up the interest. And then it was like, oh, there was some credit cards that creeped up, and that was like another almost 15 or 20,000. And I was like, whoa, this $200,000 that we have to sort out here. And then I get a call from my old accountant, and this was like April 10th. And my accountant calls me up, and if you can imagine, this is the typical version of what you would think of an accountant, with like the comb over, the big goggle glasses. He was a super nice guy, but had like 1,000 returns in his office that he was just a one-man show going through. And he says to me, "Hey, Michael, did you get my email? I didn't see a response for you." And I said, No, I didn't get it. When did you send it? He's like, "Oh, I sent it earlier this morning." So, okay, I flipped over my phone, I opened up the email, and it was noticed that I had to pay the IRS lots and lots of money that I wasn't expecting, and it turned out it wound up costing well over $100,000 when it was all said and done. That, quite frankly, this I was blindsided by. And I was just totally blown away. Not only did I have the student loan debt and a little bit of credit cards that came up, now it was like, all right, I have this, I owe the IRS this money that I have to now go into pillar number one and start cannibalizing our savings because we had bad advice, or really just not quality advice from a tax expert. See, the tax expert that I was dealing with was a good guy. He wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't out for blood, or anything like that. He just was, he was dealing with more plain vanilla type returns. And running a business and being an entrepreneur, there's more nuances that go involved. And so basically he wasn't correctly wired to do the types of things that I needed, which we would have foreseen any type of underpayment, and we would have been able to tackle it in a timely fashion. So now I was just blown away. I had to figure out my debt situation. I had this student loan thing. I had this tax situation, and I was totally blown away. And I have to figure all this out. So I started reading books. And really since that time, this is like years ago, I've been reading a book every 2 weeks on every possible area of development and financial planning, family offices. I started going to conferences. I started interviewing new tax experts because I was like, he's a nice guy, but clearly was just not up to par with what I needed. And I wound up over the course of the next few months interviewing close to 30 different tax experts. And it just coincidentally, I was interviewing tax experts for, not only for myself, but I was also interviewing them for a client. And I ran into somebody that I thought was great. He was very well known in the industry. He has tremendous experience, well over 30 years experience. He specialized in working with business owners. He was quoted in all these publications. He was a top accountant. And he was kind enough to, take over my stuff and do a regression analysis and make sure that we had the right stuff going forward. And it was just it was like almost a load off my shoulders, knowing that I had a second set of eyes on an area of somebody that was an expert, that was qualified, that had experience, that we got along together, and really felt comfortable knowing that I would be in good shape and I would get quality advice. And so I continued my study on this because it wasn't just, pillar one and pillar two. I started looking for top tier advisors across the board. We were looking for people on asset protection. We talk about wealth protection, all the top people that we can find that were high quality, that can give good advice. And I started looking at the levels of protection I had. And then the same thing when it came to legal advice around my estate. I wanted to make sure I had the proper legal guidance and how that all came together. And so I'm interviewing people, I'm meeting new people. I joined two mastermind groups in finance, in private wealth, where every couple of months we would all get together, and these were some of the top people in the private wealth field that would get together and share ideas. And I was really learning from the best of the best, across the country. And these were from every part of the country would get together, top minds in private wealth, and I would learn from them. And they would learn from me and everything. And by doing that, this was going on almost every quarter. And then we would talk amongst ourselves in between. I kept reading, going to other conferences, and then all the pieces started to come together. After a number of years of doing this, everything started to come together. And that's when I had the framework of the 5 pillars and saying how it's not just each vertical, right? It's making sure that they come together in a cohesive fashion. And it becomes really challenging just to do this on our own, because you may find somebody that is really good in one pillar, but if you have another pillar which you're getting poor advice from, or just not quality advice, it can destroy the other pillars. Just like our mindset, we can make bad decisions. And that can destroy it. If we're taking an input from people that aren't qualified to give us the advice we need, like what happened with my taxes, it really hurt another one of the pillars, right? And it set me back a certain point because I had to rebuild a couple of things and I had to try to refocus all of these areas. So what we're going to do about today is we're going to show you from a very high level, and then we're going to get granular, is how it all comes together. Who are the professional advisors that you should have on your, what I call, expert team? How do you find these advisors? What are the qualities and what are the characteristics and traits you should be looking for in getting them, and how they all work together, right? How each one of them will work together and how it's all overseen. And then we're going to go into something even better, which is to say, you have pillars in place, right? You have things that you've probably already done. How do you know if they're right? How do you know if they're going to work for you? How do you know if they're going to deliver the results that you expect to go from point A to point B? How do you bridge that gap? Will they deliver? I'm going to show you a specific process that, if you have the right expert team in place, can help you do that. So let's get into it. Let me just pull this up. So again, just going over the pillars, I just want to reiterate, most important thing is always the goals. I've been like a broken record about this. The reason why this is the foundational piece is that every strategy that you should consider should always, your goals should always be the driving force behind them. You know, I give the example, you wouldn't just go on a plane that you didn't have a destination to go to. You're just, where are you going to go? You just go in the air and fly around. So it's kind of weird. So you go on a plane, you have a destination. If you're getting on board in JFK in New York, maybe you want to go to LAX in California, but you have the ticket to go to LAX. So it's the same thing in each pillar, right? Across the board, any strategy that you're going to get into is really have a very clear understanding of your goals. Now, also the professionals you deal with, they should understand your goals and their recommendations. That should always be the driving force. So that's why I reiterate this over and over and over again, because it's really easy to wind up looking at a strategy that looks interesting, but it's not aligned with your goals. Right? So you may be at the club, you may be at a cocktail party, and you may have some friend that is telling you about this esoteric investment strategy that sounds really sexy. And you have more of a conservative mindset, let's say, and you're building this plan to, you know, get from point A to point B, but there's this sex appeal around this other strategy. Now, the reality is that strategy might be cool and it might be great. It just might not be right for you. So again, it's like I have 3 young children and I'm a big car guy. I love cars. And I think a great, sexy, cool car is like a Porsche or a Ferrari. But the reality is I need like a minivan. So it's not aligned, even though it's a cool thing for a car, it's awesome. It's not aligned with the goals for my family at this stage in life. At another stage, sure, it could open up. So that's why, I'm sounding like a broken record. It is so important. It's crucial to start with your goals and stay focused on your goals. And also, back to our mindset from Pillar 5, as we start to sway, like you get into areas where there's some turbulence in the plan. I give the analogy that you're flying on a plane, you hit some turbulence, like in your financial plan, sometimes the markets get a little rocky. And it's very important to pause and think, well, what am I investing for? What am I doing my planning for? Think about that. What are your goals? And then that's going to help redirect you to keep you online. So goals, the most important, crucial, foundational piece across the board. Okay, you with me? All right, you can do this. All right, let's move on. So we went through this. These were the 5 pillars: wealth preservation. Let me just blow this up so you can see this. Wealth preservation, wealth protection, wealth enhancement, your legacy, our mindset. And today we're going to bring everything together in the special bonus, which is your expert team. All right, your expert team, how do you find them? What are their characteristics? What are you looking for? And then what are the pitfalls? What are some of the obstacles that you may run into so you can avoid them, right? Some of the, like, I wish somebody told me this when I was interviewing my first accountant, and I found if I found the one that I'm using now, I would have been in a much better situation. So I want to learn from these experiences that I've been through that has helped improve my life, and hopefully I can impart some of this wisdom to you, and it can improve your life. All right, so let's move on here. All right, so your professional team. So your professional team, the first thing that you want to look for is you want to find somebody that has integrity. Now, this is always at the top of my list. So it's not the only thing that you want to look for, but you need, one of the major characteristics is that the professional giving you advice has integrity. They're a good person. They're giving quality advice. They're not just in it for themselves. They have a high moral, ethical valuation when it comes to working with their clientele. Integrity is a very crucial piece. And I would say that the reason why I say this is number one, this is really the top criteria. You can't deal with somebody that doesn't have integrity. If they don't have integrity, I'm out the door. All right. Second is you want to let me just make sure this is large enough for you. All right, so you want to make sure that the professional you're dealing with has specialized expertise. We're looking for, high-end, top-tier people. So I want you to think about this for a second. The accountant that I originally used, he wasn't a bad guy. He had integrity. He just didn't have the specialized expertise that I needed. Right? And he could have been great for other people, but for my situation wasn't really the right fit. He didn't have the level of expertise. So around your level of financial planning, whether it's business or personal, usually it's both, you want to surround yourself with people that are at the top tier. There's no reason to have tier 2 or tier 3 advisors when there's so many good advisors that have the expertise that you need, and they have the level of integrity that is crucial to working with for the long term. Okay, let me just go back to this. The next you want to look at is professionalism, and I talk about having incredible responsiveness. Now, the way to think about this, are you dealing with anybody that if you call or email, and then they don't have to get back to you in 2 seconds, but they don't get back to you for a week, sometimes 2 weeks. It can be one of the most frustrating things. You have a question around something that is important. It's not brain surgery important, but it's something that you'd like to know about, or at least have a deeper conversation with, that they're not back to you, and sometimes a week or 2 weeks. So that's a red flag. Now, again, it doesn't mean that you call or email and you have a response 30 seconds later. Everybody's busy doing things, but people should be getting back to you in a timely fashion. And at the very least, a level of professionalism is to say, like, okay, the response comes out. It could be from them. It could be from their staff saying, so-and-so is going to be in a meeting and can get back to you at this time. Does that work for you? Or at least get back to you within, by the end of the day. All right, 24 hours would probably be the max for at least just checking in to see what's going on. So that's just, if you're dealing with somebody that goes off the grid, right? And you just don't know where they are and you have a pressing question, that is a red flag of somebody that's not working at a high level of professionalism. All right, let's go back to the list. Next, we're talking about empathy. Now, I've highlighted empathy, and I want you to just really take a moment and read this. The empathy is, I would say, one of the most crucial characteristics of somebody, and it means that whoever you're dealing with, they should have a deep sense of purpose and concern for you. Empathy is something that I think is underrated. It is one of the most important characteristics. The one thing my clients or my friends, my family, they always tend to say to me is, Mike, I appreciate all the advice, but the one thing that really differentiates you and what we really feel is that you really, you get us and you're really invested in our success. And this is a crucial thing. And how do you know if somebody has empathy or not? Well, if they're speaking too much, talking about their products or their whatever they're selling and not listening to you, they're lacking empathy. Now, it doesn't mean that they're never talking, but basically it's to have an understanding of you, an understanding of your needs, of your concerns, and then they are trying to find solutions to help you address your concerns and your needs and the things you're looking to accomplish. So if you're ever meeting with somebody and they immediately start talking about whatever product or vehicle that they're, pitching or selling, that's a level that they don't have empathy. They're really in it for themselves. We don't want people that are in it for themselves. Advisors that I tend to seek out to advise me are interested in my goals and what I'm looking to do. And when I'm working with clients or I'm advising people, is to make sure we really understand what's going on. And any advisors we bring in to help, it's the same deal, is to make sure they really understand your world and where you're feeling and what you're coming from and what you're looking to achieve, and then lay out all the available solutions and help you think through them so you can make a sound decision, as opposed to somebody just, talking about what they want to sell you. It's a very different ballgame. So empathy, I highlighted it. It's super important. I think they're all important. Up with integrity, empathy is really two of the major things I'm always looking for when I'm working with advisors. Okay, let's go back to the list. So now we talk about operational transparency. We want everything clear and open. Now, people say that, well, how do you know about transparency? Well, as long as you know everything, if there's any conflict of interest, it doesn't mean that you can't do business. As long as it's disclosed and you're comfortable with it. When people start hiding things, and then you find out later, that's when it's a red flag that's out there. And these are the things that you need to be aware of. I remember working with somebody that we were reviewing, or giving a second opinion on an insurance policy. And we went through the illustrator. They provide these illustrations, and they were putting in a pretty substantial amount of assets. And I just knowing how to read these things over the years of just doing this time and time again. And if you've ever looked at an illustration for insurance, they're quite dense, and it's kind of tough to go through them. So I looked at that initial premium. They were rolling in a sizable chunk of money, and I saw that the cash value at the end of year one was like almost half of what they put in. And a lot of that was due to the commissions and the fees around it. And I brought it to his attention. I said, look, were you aware of this? And he said, they didn't tell me anything. They didn't tell me. They were making like I think it was like $25,000 on this thing. And they didn't tell the client this. And so we looked at a different scenario for them where they didn't have to pay so much in commissions and fees, and just let them see all the things that they potentially could do. But the point was, he trusted somebody that did not share all of the important information that was necessary to make a decision, to make a well-informed decision. And so that's what we talk about operational transparency. Everything needs to be above board. Okay? Anything cannot be hidden or not taught. It all needs to be disclosed, and not just the fine print stuff. It needs to be explained to you. And you need to understand that. If there is any issues, just as long as everybody's on the same page, that's being fully transparent. Okay. You with me? I know it's a lot. All right, and so maybe at the end of this list, I want you to take a screenshot or write these down just so you have them in the back of your mind when you're interviewing professional advisors to come work and give you advice and counsel. Okay, so lastly, we talk about personal chemistry and coordination. You want to work with somebody and feel like it's a well-oiled machine. So this is really important. That you can have somebody that's a great advisor or somebody that is meets all the criteria, but you don't jive. Or you don't get along with one another. It's not even get along, but maybe you're just wired differently. And so it's really important that you are on the same page. Doesn't mean you have to agree on everything, but you have to work well together, because these tend to not be transactional relationships. They tend to be relationships that go on for, in some cases, long periods of time. Right? I have clients, I'm doing this 20 years. I've had clients for 2 decades. So having that, being on the same page with each other and being able to work together over the long term and have that cohesive relationship is really, really crucial. So I'm going to put this back up on the screen. Maybe you take a screenshot or just jot these down. These are really just some of the criteria that you should be looking for when you're interviewing or taking on a new professional advisor. Okay, I'm just going to let you take a screenshot or write this down. Okay, let's move on. So the experts you need. Who are the experts that you actually need for your team for all the pillars? And again, getting the right, or just getting financial advice I like to say, is life-changing. It could be for the better or it could be for the worse, right? So for me, like, I had originally bad tax advice and it was for the worse. And so now I learned from that, and now it's, we look for people that can really improve our quality of life. All right, so who do you actually need on your team? Let me blow this up. So first, I would say you want tax and administrative professionals, people that are going to help you make good decisions around your taxes. Next, you need investment specialists. Third, we want life and health insurance providers. Fourth, we want what I call a private client attorney or a private client lawyer that focuses on trusts and estates. Fifth, we want what's called a personal line specialist. Now, a personal line specialist, this is somebody that is going to be helping around just the basic homeowners insurance. This is somebody that's going to help around auto insurance, umbrella policies, somebody that helps with business insurance, general liability, workers' comp, all of those things. That's what I call a personal line specialist. Now, it's really important to not just go on the lowest price. We want somebody that's going to give us a holistic view and say, how can you really have the right levels of protection around every area so you don't have any gaps where you're not really protected? Going back to the wealth protection pillar. So a personal line specialist is somebody that looks at everything, not just somebody that does your auto insurance, not just somebody that does your homeowners, somebody that will say, all right, this is what you have, here's the missing pieces, and here's some things you may want to consider doing. And they look at everything holistically. All right, that's what a lot of people ask me what's a personal line specialist. It's really home, auto, umbrella, and if you have a business, the business insurance, directors and officers, errors and omission, workers' comp, general liability, things along those lines. That's what a personal line specialist does. Okay, and then lastly, we want somebody that works in credit and lending, professionals in this space. Now, these are a lot of professionals that you need to have, and in many things you want to look at, it's not just having the right people, it's how do you coordinate amongst them. So I'll give you an example. We had a situation where we were looking at a way to reduce taxes, and we were also looking at a way to do some charitable giving. And so there were some strategies that we were able to put in place or look at, but it took the coordination of the tax expert and the private client attorney and the investment specialist to make sure that everything came together. So coordination around all of these things is key. It's crucial, right? If you have all of these verticals working for you, if you have each pillar going and then you have a variety of professionals, but they don't talk to one another, that could become a problem, because you may have a really good investment strategy, but there might be some tax nuances around it that the tax expert really should be looking at. Or if you're doing some, trust and estate planning, and you're doing some type of charitable trust, it needs to be invested a certain way. You need the investment specialist to really build the portfolio the right way so it's aligned with whatever the trust is detailed or saying to do. So how do you coordinate all of these things? How do you put everything together? So I want you to think about building out the pillars, and I want you to think about building out your expert team as if you were building a house. Okay? If you were building a home, basically you're going to have a blueprint of all the things that you need to do, and you're going to have a slew of contractors. But it all comes together with the general contractor. The general contractor is your point person. The point person that's going to lay out the blueprint. They're going to bring in the architects, and they're going to know the right architects to have. They're going to bring in the plumbers, the electricians, the people that do interior design. They're going to have the people that, if you want the pool, they're going to have the people to do the pool the right way, the way that you want it. And they're going to make sure everybody talks together. You would never build a house with 4 architects, 3 plumbers, 5 electricians. At the end of the day, you'd have 12 rooms that don't work together. The plumbing wouldn't go, the lights would go on in one room but not the other, the pool would be kind of weird. You just wouldn't do that. So I want us to think about your financial plan in the same light. We want to have a general contractor, what I call a true wealth planner, that oversees everything holistically. And I'm not talking about somebody who says, oh, we do it holistically, but they only stick to their vertical. Well, that's not looking at holistically. Like in my case, if somebody looked at my holistic picture, the first thing they would address is taxes, right? It's the first thing they would address would be the tax. This is years ago. They would say, all right, we have to sort this out before we start planning on something else. And that's where you're going to start looking for these types of things. Somebody that looks at the entire picture, says, all right, what do we need to do first? Who are the people we need to bring in? Sometimes you don't need to do all of them at one time. You build upon each other. You build and you build and you build, and you see where are the areas of concern first. And the true wealth planner is somebody that's going to bring these people in, and they're going to coordinate so everything works in a cohesive, like a well-oiled machine. So it's transparent, it's cost-effective, and everything works. So at the end of the day, you have your dream house, or you're in a really good position to achieve your financial goals, and by doing that, really improve your quality of life. And having somebody that can coordinate all of these moving parts, and don't kid yourself, there's a lot of moving parts. In each pillar, there's a lot of moving parts. So having somebody, a general, to oversee the troops is really, really important. So coordination is key, crucial to putting this thing together. Okay, let's move on. All right, so the obstacles that we all run into is who when we're looking for advisors, like who are the types of advisors we should be avoiding? Okay, so here's the deal. There are hundreds of thousands. I think there's like close to 500 financial advisors in this country. I have no idea how many accountants, but I'm assuming there's lots of accountants. Probably if I opened my window and I threw a tennis ball at him, I might hit an accountant. There's so many of them. There's so many lawyers out there. There's so many insurance people out there. So as you're interviewing people, I want you to be aware of some of the obstacles you're going to run into, and what are the red flags or the advisors that you should really be wary of or avoid? Because, again, if you get poor financial advice, it's a good thing that you're seeking out financial advice, but if you get it from people that don't have the experience or aren't qualified to give it to you, it can wreak havoc. So I'm going to give you 3 types of advisors that you should be aware of, and if you do run into them, avoid them like the plague. All right, let me pull this back up. So the first is what I call pretenders. Now, this is where I find most of the advisors that are out there. Whether they're financial advisors, whether they're accountants or lawyers, they're not that they're bad people. They have integrity. They're on the list. They're professional. They do all the things right, but they're limited in their experience. Like they almost don't know what they don't know, which could be dangerous. It was going back to my accountant. He was a good guy, but there was things he wasn't capable of doing in my world that, quite frankly, it wasn't so involved. It was really just doing some projections in advance, what we call a pro forma, which would have kind of been okay for me. So you want to find somebody that is not one of these pretenders. You want people that have the right experience and right qualifications. These people have good intentions. They're not out to hurt you. They're just limited in their expertise or their ability to deliver advanced planning solutions and to really look at things on a holistic level. So if you're dealing with these people, you run into these types of people, you want to really look at their experience and their expertise. So the questions you want to ask is, what are the types of clients that you're working with? Give me an example or two of how you address a situation like mine and see what their answers say. And your antennas will go off whether or not that they're going to be up to snuff, if you will. All right, so those are the pretenders, and they can really have disastrous impacts, as they did for me. So you want to be on the lookout for these types of advisors. The next is even worse. These are predatory advisors. Predatory advisors, these are advisors that actively engage in illegal behavior. So we all have heard of the Bernie Madoff situation. That's a perfect example of predatory advisors. Now, make no mistake about it, that was clearly a disaster at the largest scale we can imagine, but these things are going on all the time. They're just not at that size and scope. So when anything seems too good to be true, it probably is. If somebody's telling you that the returns are going to be X and they've never lost no matter what, that's a red flag that something's off. Right? There's always ebbs and flows and everything, and whenever it seems too good to be true, it typically is. So you just want to pause and go a little bit deeper and get more due diligence, maybe get a second opinion on something. It may sound really good to you, but if you run into something that just seems a little bit too good to be true, you want to get a second opinion on that. All right, and then the third type of advisor we want to be aware of and avoid, I'm going to blow this up, is an exploiter. Now, these are really challenging to run into, or challenging to really detect, because they tend to have technical savvy, they have lots of experience, and they seem really smart, and they are. However, what they're doing is they're not doing anything illegal, but they're looking at strategies that kind of push the envelope. And the reality is, if they work, great, but if they don't work, they're still making their money and they can care less. They lack the empathy. So they're pushing the envelope into strategies that may sound sexy. They may or may not be aligned with your goals, but they don't care. They only care about themselves. And they're only caring about lining their own pockets. And that's why we call them exploiters. They have zero empathy, and they will push the envelope if it helps them close some type of deal. So again, anytime somebody's got this technical wizardry that it just didn't land for you, it just sounded almost like it went above our heads. Again, time to pause, slow down. I always like to say, why don't you explain it to me like I'm a third grader? Have them walk me through it. I'm never embarrassed. Like if I don't understand something that might be over my head, I don't want to be taken for a ride. So I said, why don't you explain it to me like I'm a third grader and spell it out for me? And then if I still am not sure, I look for a second opinion just to make sure, am I dealing with the right people? So let me just pull this back up for you. Pretenders, predatory advisors, exploiters. These are the three types of advisors you should avoid. Now, how do you know? Right? How do you know that if you may have some people you're dealing with now, how do you even know? So let me just walk you through this. So first is the people you're dealing with are not providing you with what I call holistic advice. They're not looking at all 5 pillars. So if you ever met with somebody and they're immediately pitching you a product, that's not somebody that's providing holistic advice. They're in it for selling you a product. So you may run into somebody that just wants to sell you insurance, or just wants to sell you investments, or just wants to sell you a will or something like that, without understanding what's going on in the other pillars. Remember, if you don't look at everything and how they interact together, it can have disastrous results. And you also want to make sure that they'll be able to give you good behavioral advice so we can help control our mindset, because as trials and tribulations come along, they're not giving you that behavioral coaching along the way. When like the turbulence hits, that could be a problem. So I don't know about you, but when I'm on like an airplane, I'm not the best flyer. After I had kids, I just became a worse flyer. And when we start hitting a rough patch of air, when the captain comes on and says, there's a little bit of rough air, it's going to be about 10 or 15 minutes. We're looking for better air to be in. And, then it should be okay. Now, I don't know. I'm usually sitting in an aisle seat because I'm 6'4" and I can't see out the window. I don't know what's going on. So it's a little bit frightening for me. But when the captain comes on, it just makes me feel a little bit better. It calms me down. However, have you ever been on a plane where you're hitting that turbulence and the stewardesses or the people working on the plane, they get strapped in, which it's not good when they're no longer pushing the cart and serving drinks, and nobody comes on and nobody tells you it's going to be okay? At that point, it's like I start freaking out. So when you're dealing with advisors, they should be looking at the holistic level, be able to give you the behavioral coaching along the way in every aspect over time, to give you that sense that they really understand you and can calm those concerns and address them as events unfold. Okay, next is they're not working cohesively and proactively with other professionals. So like I said, it's if you built a house, if you had the electrician not talking with the contractor or the architect not talking with the plumber, it doesn't work. Everybody has to be working from the same blueprint. So the coordination, again, is crucial around these things. So the advisors you're working with, yes, there should be somebody at the helm, but at the very least, they should be speaking amongst themselves to make sure that everything works together. Okay, so now if we look at The next one is, this is a key thing. They're not seen as a thought leader in the industry. Now, what's a thought leader? A thought leader tends to be somebody that puts out a lot of content. They might be writing articles. They could be in the news. These are people that we learn from. They might be doing training courses, people that are being interviewed from time to time. Thought leaders are looked at not only by the public, but amongst the peers in the industry as the people that are at the top of the game. So the question is, are the people you're dealing with, do they get quoted in articles? Are they interviewed by the press? Do they speak at any events? Are they a keynote speaker on the topic that you're working with them in? Are they looked at the industry at the top of their field? Now, they don't have to do all of these things, but it's one of the things you'd want to see, that the advisors you're working with tend to have the respect, or they're looked at by people around the world, or at least in the industry, as at the top of their field. That's what a thought leader is. Okay. Next, let me just pull this back up, is they're not providing advanced planning strategies. Now, this is another thing where people just might be working in a certain vertical, and there could be some advanced things that you can be doing, but they're just not aware of them. Or if they are aware of them, they're just not implementing them for you. So you could be missing out on opportunities. So again, when it comes to the advisors you're dealing with, is there anything else? Are they just pitching you a product or a strategy, or is there anything else that can really move the needle? Anything that's more than a product? Is there a more comprehensive, sophisticated strategy that could really work for you? Okay, next, let me just go back to this so you can see it, is they're not using a wealth planning process. Now, if you want to just like all of this stuff coming together, if they're working holistically, proactively with other folks, are they a thought leader? How do you know if they're doing this? They typically will have a well-defined process that's systematic and meticulous to understanding what's important to you, laying out the solutions in a way that you can understand them, and then actually providing a course of action. So if you've never seen a wealth planning process, I'm going to show you one. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly like this. This is one that I found to be really powerful, that's been really well received, and it has served the folks that I worked with over the years really well. So it should be some form of what I'm about to show you. Okay, so a wealth planning process should look something like this. It should start with a discovery meeting. Now, a discovery meeting is really just what it sounds like. In the first time that you meet with an advisor, they should not be talking that much. They should be listening. All right, it should be about 80% you sharing what your concerns are, what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, and they should be taking notes. If you ever find yourself in an initial meeting where they're doing all the talking and they start pitching whatever product or whatever vehicle they're doing, that's when it's time to hit the pause button and politely excuse yourself. Red flag number one, they're just not in it for you. So it goes back to the list of the characteristics that we all want is, all right, in the discovery meeting, are they listening to you? Are they finding out what's important to you? And if not, done. All right, so let's say they do that. Let me just blow this back up. The second meeting should be an assessment. All right, now an assessment, it's really straightforward. Between the first meeting and the second meeting, they're going to have some information from you. There might be some more information that they might request to go a little bit deeper. Basically, between meeting number one and meeting number two should span anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, depending upon the size and scope of your financial world. Now, based on the size and scope of that, they should be pouring over everything. They should be pouring over your investments, your cash flow, your net worth. They should be looking at all of your protection planning that's in place. They should be looking at your legal documents, your wills, your trust, your estates. How does everything work together? And then should be coming back to you with what I call a comprehensive objective assessment. Now, here's a crucial thing: is in meeting number two, after they've done the assessment, they should be framing any recommendations to you in a way that you understand it. Now, framing is really important. If anybody ever starts presenting a strategy and the more esoteric you get, the nuances around it can be a little bit confusing. So the traits of a really good professional advisor is to take a very esoteric strategy and package it in a digestible way where somebody that's not in the business can understand it. Remember what I said? Tell me like I'm a third grader. I want to understand it. So once I get it, then I can make an educated decision. So if it ever seems like who's ever presenting, it's just over your head, hit the pause button. Tell it to me like I'm a third grader. It should be framed in a way that you understand what you're getting involved with. Now, here's another thing. During discovery, they're going to do their assessment for 2 to 3 weeks. When they go over the assessment and they're making any recommendations and framing them, here's a key thing. This is not a time to engage. This is not a time to implement. So if any advisor is then pushing to move forward at that point, it's a time to pause. You should have an opportunity to reflect on the assessment, review any recommendations that are being brought up, so then you can come back to an implementation meeting. Now, sometimes you go through the assessment and some of the recommendations, and it needs to be refined a little bit. There might be a couple of things that were left out, which is fine, and that's normal. But you're vetting through things. You're going through them. So when we see these things happen, we want to make sure that you have the appropriate amount of time to review everything. And this way, if you have any questions, they could be addressed in a timely manner. And then if there's any refinement that has to happen prior to implementation, you're never implementing the wrong strategy. And then implementation is a separate meeting in of itself. It's pretty straightforward. Everybody agrees on a strategy. There's usually documents that need to be signed off on, and then the professional advisors do their thing. And then the last is ongoing monitoring and refining. The plans you set up now are not carved in stone. These plans can and should be looked at on an ongoing basis. And it's not something that you need to look at every day. You don't even need to look at it every quarter. Again, that's the most I would look at these things. But typically, when there's a major change in your life, your advisor or your true wealth planner should really know about these things. And a major change could be, was there a birth in the family? Was there a death in the family? Did you buy a business? Did you sell a business? Did you make more money? Did you lose money? Did you get married? Did you get divorced? There's a number of things that can trigger a reason to adjust or refine the plan. And then there's also outside effects that happen. There are changes in the tax code. There are changes in the law that need to be looked at, and your professional advisor should be triggering those types of conversations. And a lot of times it may or may not have an impact, but at the very least it should be looked at. So again, I just want to pull up the process again. Again, it doesn't have to be exactly like this. This is just an example, something that has served me, very well over the years. Any wealth planning process should be some form of this, but the key is that discovery and assessment. Okay. So next, what's the solution? How do you do this? Well, you got to find a true wealth planner. True wealth planner, how do you find them? Well, I would say you want to start by asking for other professionals. If you have one professional that you're dealing with, which is like top shelf, that professional typically knows the key players in the industry. They're going to know who the thought leaders are in the industry. So that's where I would start. Now, if let's say you don't have a top tier professional, maybe you just have some professionals you don't really know, the next I would say is you want to ask your peers. Now, I wouldn't just ask any peer. I'd look for somebody that seems to have it all together and get a recommendation from them. And then lastly, let me just pull this up. This is something that if you don't have any friends or any friends that you'd feel comfortable asking, and you don't get any, if you don't have any professionals that are top tier, basically you could start looking into the industry to find out who are the thought leaders, and you can contact them directly. All right. Now, how do you bring everything together? Now, a lot of times people say, well, Mike, this is great, and I have all these pieces together, but I don't know if they're going to deliver. I don't know if I'm dealing with the right people. I have these people I'm working with. I have these plans in place, but I don't really know if it's going to get me from point A to point B. I don't know if I'm going to be able to bridge the gap. And if you've ever said that, that's good, because nobody's really sure. Nobody really has it all together. And it's good to kind of dust it off and look at it. So I'm going to walk you through a process that's going to show you how do you find out if your plans will deliver as expected. If not, what do you do about it? And if you're not dealing with the right advisors, this will show that as well. So let me just pull this back up. This is a method I call stress testing. So if you're never 100% sure that your financial plans or the strategies you're looking at will deliver the way that you want or you expect, I say you want to stress test. Now, what does this look like? I'm going to keep this magnified here just to walk you through, and I'm going to bounce back and forth. So first, again, I sound like a broken record, is to determine your goals. I can't say it enough. Your goals have to be the driving force behind every strategy you're looking at. So when we're stress testing, we need to understand what you're looking to accomplish. All right, let me go back to this. Then, after we determine your goals, basically we want to evaluate what you currently have in place or anything that's being proposed or any products or strategies that are actually being proposed to you. Now, how do we do that? So first, you want to look at the assumptions. Now, what does that mean, Mike? People say, well, what do you mean the assumptions? So pretty much everything that you're doing, the legal work, there's language in the contracts or the wills. If you're ever doing insurance planning, there's illustrations. The illustrations have these assumptions where they're going to say, all right, the cash value has these expected returns. Now, these returns can be off the charts, which aren't realistic. And a lot of times we see that they could just be trying to make a sale. So are the parameters, the underlying assumptions true? Now, if you're dealing with investments, there's lots of investments that you have to factor in and weigh certain parameters that can impact your return. So first is, what is the expected return? Two, what's the inflation rate? Remember the purchasing power? I gave the example of the cup of coffee. So I'm like a Starbucks junkie. I drink a lot of coffee, like way too much. And basically, I've been drinking the same cup of coffee for, I can't even remember, but basically they call it a red-eye misto, which is really just a small coffee with a shot of espresso and some steamed milk. Now, the only change I've made to this over the years is I switched from like skim milk to almond milk because my wife says almond milk is better for me. I don't know. So in any event, this cup of coffee had cost me, I think, like $2.80 or $2.90 20 years ago. Same cup of coffee now is like $4.20. So I haven't changed anything, but my cost of living has gone up just because of inflation. So back to working the assumptions is the inflation rate in your plan correct? Are the taxes looked at correct? Are the risk levels, like how much volatility that's expected, correct? Then once we look at the assumptions, we're going to look at, are they aligned with your goals? Again, just going back to your goals being super important. You can have the greatest strategy out there. I give the example of Ferrari is a great strategy for a sports car, but if you're like me and you have 3 little kids, you need a minivan. So does the strategy work for you? Is it aligned with your goals? Will it get you from point A to point B? And then third, we want to look at the cost structure. So this is like going back to the friend that we were looking at, the insurance, where there was a lot of things going wrong here. We looked at it as just, we were giving a second opinion, stress testing what was being proposed. And what we found was the assumptions were way off. They were anticipating returns that were off the charts in a linear fashion, like showing like every year it would grow by, I was like double digits. And it just didn't make sense. That wasn't realistic. There's ebbs and flows in what goes on there. Secondly, it was aligned, like the level of protection and what he was looking to do was aligned with his goals, but the assumptions were off. So that was a problem. And then lastly was the cost structure. We found that they were charging, commissions that were just off the charts, and not anything. It was just what the product they were doing had high levels of commission. And so we looked for other ways that we can have, the right assumptions that were aligned with the goals and a better cost model. So basically what you want to look at, are the assumptions right? Are they aligned with your goals? And if they are, great. Is it the best, most cost-effective way to do it? You with me? Okay. Then next is really the results. All right, so how does this play out when you do stress testing? Let me just walk you through it. So in stress testing, typically about half of the time that we look at these things, you stay the course. We, pour over everything. We look at it and it's like, all right, if everything looks good, the recommendation should be to stay the course. That's about half the time. It's like going to the doctor. They do all the blood work and everything, and you got to go to the doctor, and they come back and say everything looks good. Stay the course. Peace of mind. Okay, I'm good. I'll see you next year. Then the next is, let me just blow this back up, is the other 50% of the time usually falls into one of two categories. The first is everything's still okay, but there's some minor tweaks or adjustments that need to be made. So if you go to the doctor, say, it's all good, but maybe you can lose 5 pounds. Maybe exercise 1 or 2 days a week. Maybe instead of eating burgers and drinking soda every day, throw in one salad. So some minor tweaks or changes along the way that can really move the needle for you. Now the other one, let me just pull this back up, is what I call system failure. Now, system failure means that there's major changes needed or you have missed opportunities. So what happens if you fall into the system failure portion of the stress test? Well, how do you deal with it? Straightforward. First, really what this means when you have system failure is that the strategies are not going to, or they're not expected to deliver the results that you want. So it's like, what's the point of doing it? It's like getting on the plane. You want to go from New York to LA and they drop you off in Texas. I like Texas, but if I want to go to LA, it's not going to work. I need to redirect or change course, if you will. Secondly, if it's system failure, you may have professional advisors that aren't up to the task. So like if I had been stress tested, years ago, they would have found like, all right, you need to look at a different tax expert to give you some advice here. And then in the second part of this is that the current strategy is still pretty good, maybe some changes, but there's some big missed opportunities that you should really be exploring that can move the needle for you. So this is like, I'll give you an example. So working around, the private wealth industry over the years, just by asking questions. I remember a scenario we were talking about a tax issue a client was having, and we also just had a really good understanding of their situation and what they were looking to achieve. And as we were doing the legacy planning, there was a family member that had special needs, and it was one of the areas of concerns. So there was an opportunity to ensure that there was funding for this child for, really, I think for his entire life, that would ensure this. And it was something that the clients, they really didn't even know was an opportunity for them. And it wasn't so much that it just, made them tons of money. It just gave them the peace of mind that, that their relative, that they had the ability to ensure that there would always be capital to take care of their medical needs. And it was really important, and it really landed well for them because it was an opportunity that could have been missed, and it gave them some peace of mind, and it made them feel like they were able to take care of their family in a more meaningful way. All right, so that's really how the stress testing works and how it really breaks down. So when you're not 100% sure around your financial plans, and I haven't met anybody that says it's 100% going to work, not 100% sure, you want to stress test. Now, basically what we can do is, what I'm offering for all of you that have gone through this course is you can click the link below and you can schedule a free discovery call with me. All right, this is something that you will go through the initial call. You're going to answer some questions to see if you qualify for the stress test. If you do, you get a free call directly with me. We're going to spend an hour together, which is a $500 value, right? And you're going to get that for free. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through the stress testing process, just like I went through. We're going to pour over everything. We're going to understand what's going on in your world. Is it aligned with your goals? Are there any gaps or any missed opportunities? And if there are, is to show you what you can do to really close those gaps and improve your quality of life. So click the link below if you want your free stress test, if you want to do it directly with me, answer the question, see if you qualify, and we'll get off to the races, and hopefully that can really serve you and improve your quality of life. At the very, very least, what you're going to get is the peace of mind that what you have in place is working well. And if it's not working well, you're going to have the strategies and tactics and the specific action steps of exactly what to do to, again, close that gap and improve your quality of life. So click the link below, see if you qualify for the stress test. I hope this message has served you. I hope you've really enjoyed the 5 pillars of wealth mastery. It has been an honor to serve you and to share and impart some of the things I've learned along the way. And I hope at the very least it helps improve your quality of life. I'm Michael Gold. I look forward to seeing you out there. Click the link below.